Hey folks, welcome to Healing Outside the Box. This week I got busy with another project, so I hope you don't mind if I repeat an old episode that I think is important. And it's this: music can be used as therapy, whether it be to pick you up, soothe you, console you, make you feel closer to God, or simply party with your friends. There are peppy songs that make you feel happy, like the song Happy. It's got lots of major chords and a nice tempo. Or you could play music to soothe you, like flutes and violins. There's choir music that I think we all know makes us feel better when we're in church. There's consoling music, maybe bluesy music by someone like Billie Holiday, God Bless the Child. And then there's your basic party music. When I was a kid in the late 60s and early 70s, it was Motown stuff. Or maybe the Rolling Stones. Whatever floats your boat, as they say. Now, there's an expert in this field. His name is Oliver Sacks. I mentioned him in this episode. He's a neurologist that is known to people as the physician portrayed in the movie Awakenings. Oliver Sacks discovered that people with severe Parkinson's suddenly came to life when they heard music from their youth. And speaking of Oliver Sacks, I remember he said in one of his books that people can have auditory hallucinations, and that's perfectly normal. So I was so glad he said that because, well, occasionally when I'm trying to get to sleep, I hear a marching band playing Stars and Stripes, and I'm thinking, well, that's a bit odd for someone in the neighborhood to be playing that kind of music around midnight. Then at some point I realize that it's all in my head. And then I feel, well, like Abby Normal. That's a reference to Young Frankenstein, by the way, in case that's not your favorite movie. But what Oliver Sacks is basically saying is that music in many different contexts can be therapeutic. I should probably preface this by saying that I'm no expert in this whole music as therapy thing. I'm basically flapping my gums to give you all some food for thought that perhaps we could all use music in our lives. And maybe to help with many different things. It could be one more tool in the toolbox, as they say. Now, at the end of this episode, I mentioned something about plotting to put together a pilot study of about 20 children with autism to try to help them with a combination of music therapy, a whole foods organic diet, and some form of meditation. Since it's been 3 years since I published that episode, you may be wondering about what happened. What happened is that I put together a protocol. I actually spent weeks on it. I contacted several groups, one of them being Autism Speaks, right here in the Boston area, but I was not able to get the funding I needed to make the study happen. But I'm not giving up. If there's any women out there that want to help out trying to get this small study off the ground and out of the starting gate, I would be very pleased to hear that. I haven't given up on that dream, but I might need some music to get me in the mood to fight the good fight and help these kids with autism. Until then, I'm playing this repeat episode that I did 3 years ago because it's always good to be reminded that we can get our healing from all kinds of different places. So enjoy the episode. Hey folks, I'm Jean Tiberio. I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach. I'd like to welcome you to Healing Outside the Box. This week's episode is 29, and I'm calling it Music as Therapy. Now, as I was reading up on this, I noticed they distinguish between music as therapy and music in therapy. With music as therapy, music is in the foreground. For example, the client may pick his or her favorite music and listen to it for the desired effect. Now there's happy music, if you're feeling a little down and want something to perk you up, and there's soothing music, and everything in between. They say it usually works to focus on the music that the client really likes. In the case of Alzheimer's patients, it would be music from their era, when they were in their 20s. Music in therapy is different in that the client-therapist relationship is the primary focus. In other words, the therapist is using music to help the client with either trauma or depression or whatever the client needs. In this case, the client-therapist relationship is in the foreground and is more important than the particular music. I'm getting my info for today's show from two basic sources. The first is a documentary called Alive Inside. If you'd like to listen to the whole documentary, I'll give you the link on the show notes. The second is a podcast from the NPR people, and it's called Stuff You Should Know, hosted by Josh and Chuck, and it's the episode September 20th, 2013. Now, the go-to guy for music as therapy is a physician by the name of Oliver Sacks. He is what I would call a living Renaissance man. He's a Brit who studied at Oxford and came to the States to practice medicine. I think his specialty is neurology, but he's also written books, lots of books, both fiction and nonfiction. I seem to remember a long time ago reading the book called The Man That Mistook His Wife for a Hat. It's really a good short story. He's also written plenty of books on the topic of how music affects the brain. By the way, he was the author of a book called Awakenings, which became a movie starring Robin Williams. I really like this guy because his background is medicine, yet when he speaks, he draws the listener in, and he seems like such a gentle, kind man. Now, first, the documentary. It's called Alive Inside, and it documents a social worker who goes from nursing home to nursing home and gives patients with Alzheimer's a set of headphones and an iPod loaded with their favorite music. He usually asked the family members what music they were drawn to when they were young. In one case, there was a guy named Henry in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. He was almost mute. He held his head down and communicated very little with the caring people around him. When the social worker put on the headphones and he heard an old familiar song, I think it was Cab Calloway, that song brought him to life, and he started talking and moving his body and smiling a big smile. Apparently that song stimulated his memory, and this, I guess, would be the frontal cortex, according to the experts. There's been studies about how music helps children with autism as well, and I'll find a link for you in the show notes later. If you just want to watch this guy Henry, it's actually on YouTube and it's gotten 4 million hits. I'll give you the link to that as well. Now, as for the podcast called Stuff You Should Know on music in the brain, they talk about how several areas of the brain are stimulated when someone listens to music. I think we all know that different songs can trigger different emotions. Art and music together exercise those emotional muscles. Steven Pinker is a linguist who has a tendency to say that music is enjoyable and enhances sympathy, kindness, love, but it's not essential for life. But here's the question: does it heal? Now, everyone has their own response to that, but I think it does. When we first hear music, we hear the pitch, the rhythm, melody, and apparently our frontal lobe and our temporal lobe of the brain are stimulated. But there's much more. If you close your eyes, sometimes you can visualize the music. A musician who's trained to listen to music may actually be able to visualize the notes. The rest of us might visualize colors or movement. Now, if you know the lyrics and start singing, more areas of the brain light up. The visual cortex, and of course the language area, because you're remembering the lyrics. When the motor cortex in the brain is stimulated, we start tapping our feet and bobbing our heads. In the cerebellum, we're trying to figure out where the music is headed. If you know the tune, you might know that the bridge of the song is coming up. You might be trying to figure out how many more verses, or memory when you heard that music before pops up. Now, there's happy and sad songs. The major keys generally provoke happiness, or are upbeat, as we'd say. The sad songs are in the minor keys mostly, and we know that when we hear them. There's been studies about music, obviously. Cancer patients had a slightly lower blood pressure when the music was played during their surgery. Music can have a calming effect. People have tried it for pain or anxiety. If you listened to my podcast 4 weeks ago, I talked about Alice's Restaurant. That to me says Thanksgiving. And it's an anti-war song, so it brings back memories of the late 60s when the music was really good, according to me, that is. Josh and Chuck from Stuff You Should Know mentioned that music to them is unpacking what the artist had packed. I kind of like that quote. Certain songs will trigger very specific memories. When we like the songs, we tend to remember the artist's name. If only we could tie that song to where we put our car keys, we'd be all set. Couples have their love songs and maybe their breakup songs. Oh, Danny Boy reminds us of a funeral. The Beach Boys reminds us of summer fun. And of course, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony in C minor reminds me, anyway, of the Sugar Frosted Flakes commercial. Sugar Frosted Flakes. Now, what is my point to all of this? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Lately, I've had a bee in my bonnet, or a thought in my head, about working with mothers who have children suffering from autism. I thought it might be interesting to combine nutrition, more specifically whole foods, non-GMO, etc., with music soothing to them, and meditation, possibly either transcendental meditation or guided imagery meditation called the Healing Journey. In the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be writing down a protocol that combines all 3 therapies. I will be in touch with everyone, probably in 3 to 4 weeks, when I have all this nailed down, because I'll be recruiting mothers who have children with autism to test this out in a small pilot study. By the way, the food will be free of charge, as will the meditation tapes and music devices such as iPods, etc., as needed. But again, I'll let you know more in the future when I have it all tied up in a bow in terms of where I'm going with this. That's all I have for you today. Be well, and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.